Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wretchedverse. What's the Wretchedverse, Miguel? Well, first, it's not something that we actually came out with.
No, but it's lots
We
of
did,
things
but
right
we
now.
didn't exactly.
Well, it started as a fantasy game only, but then
Yeah,
it
but I'm saying that
developed.
the Wretchedverse. Yes, some people start calling it the Wretchedverse, and we just adapted it. So we're
Yes,
going to
well,
explain
uh,
Wretched and the Wretched Spirit.
maybe the best way to explain it is not using the Wretched verse because it's something that was accidental. It wasn't planned, but using the another expression, the one that the RPG Pandit used, uh, which that one was since the beginning something that we wanted to do. We
Spaghetti.
called it spaghettipunk. Obviously, we didn't think about that because that word, that expression didn't exist. He invented it when he was doing one of those videos. Um, but it represents what these games
Wretched
are.
is. Yeah.
So
There's one cat in my lap, and there's another one that wants to go. But pass it. Well, this one is mad, of course.
the main inspirations are movies from the 80s, the 70s, some of them even from the 60s, which are Italian productions. Not only Italian productions, some are Spanish, but they
European
are
low
mostly
budget
European. Yeah.
productions.
So let's begin with the Bastards, the fantasy game. Wretched Bastards was the first game we published. That um, it was meant to be a role-playing game that created the illusion that you were playing in the same setting or in a similar setting to those movies that were Conan rip-offs of the 80s. Those
Like
were
the
mostly
barbarians.
the Barbarians and the Conquest and several other things that at the time were some were big successes, some not as much, but so they were mostly European productions, and the best ones were Italian movies, Italian productions. Those two examples are
Exactly. I think those are the best. Well,
yeah, probably
the most iconic
at least
examples.
for us they were the most important. Obviously, Barbarians is a bit comedy, but that's also possible in our games. Not entirely comedy, but light mood. So on one side, the the reason that makes this spaghetti is the fact that some of the movies, or most of the movies that are behind our influences are Italian. The other one is our own way of approaching things that is similar to the Italian movies that were basically ripping off other stuff.
Exactly.
And we are doing the same.
Exactly. And let's add into that, so the thing, and that's why the Wretched name comes. That's the idea that you play anti-heroes.
Yep. Exactly like in most of those movies. So in these movies, you are not playing a clean-cut hero. You are not in the movies, but in our games. In the movies, it's the same thing. In the movies, the protagonists aren't exactly the same as not D&D movie.
Yes, they're not heroic. They're not paladins.
At the same time, they may be better D&D movies than the D&D movies, but that's because problems anyway. The same goes for Western spaghetti.
Western spaghetti is the best example for this to exemplify playing Wretcheds.
We did one of our games is Wretched Country, but even before that, when we did Wretched Bastards, which is fantasy, we were already thinking about spaghetti movies because we wanted to do a game where you play anti-heroes or villains, villains.
And also had the cinematic side of it, because that's something that we like. We love films, and yes, we love low budget bad films. They are sometimes very good. And yeah, we wanted to create a world and a game that would showcase that would give you that feeling that you are playing a low budget movie.
Mm-hmm. And one where the protagonists aren't nice people. They are supposed to be driven by greed, lust, wrath,
Slots.
Slot. Well, slot
Pride
doesn't
doesn't
drive
drive
much.
you. You can drive it to inaction.
Yeah, pride, greed, and I don't know if you covered them all, but
Gluttony,
these
well, the
are
seven, the
these are the
seven
seven sins and the
transgressions.
seven, which we call seven transgressions as a mechanic. Um, these are a very important thing in Wretched games. This is what, in a way, it's the concept of a character and how he earns experience points. Not the only thing, not the only way to earn experience points, but one of the ways of earning experience points. Acting according to the sin that drives the character. Obviously, you can be a lustful character who is also greedy, but each character has one main transgression, which is the one that, in a mechanical way, applies, and then he may be a bad person by other reasons, for other reasons, but that's the most important one. There are other things about how you earn experience that, not just the transgressions, the kind of actions that you do, as
Wretched
yeah,
anti-hero actions.
wretched actions such as stealing, which is basically something that normal games already give you some experience points for. Obviously, if you are going to a dungeon and
But
finding
that's not
gold,
stealing.
yeah.
Well,
Well,
you're stealing from ghouls or stealing from a dead
yeah.
civilization,
Well,
dead
anyway,
people.
we stress that part that you only get points if you are stealing.
Yes, if you're going to a dungeon and pick up stuff,
yeah.
that's not stealing.
But killing is something that in some games is already awarded, which not all, but in some is already awarded experience points. And here, obviously, killing creatures and not cats. Cats, no.
Yeah, you get, if you kill cats, you lose experience
Yeah.
points.
Well, it's not in the rules, but
Yeah, no, it's not, but it should be.
other things as well, it depends. But every bad action can be rewarded.
Lying,
Yeah, lying and cheating
seducing
and seducing people.
someone,
Yeah, and basically anything that you can
double
think of.
crossing the party.
Yeah, well, that's also obviously there's a limit there because you have to play with other people, but you can use those kinds of internal frictions to create new stories. So it's not always a bad thing. So this is a concept. As we mentioned before, we started with Wretched Bastards, which was and is the fantasy game, and it will be re-released in a month, maybe. Now as a setting instead of a game.
Yes, because now we did the generic rules. Well, I'm not gonna say the final version because probably they're going to change, but the streamlined version for generic. And we will work in each of our genres as a setting. Of course, there will be some rules adjusted for that specific type of game.
Yeah.
But it will also be about world building.
Yeah, mostly for that. And when we did the Bastards, we weren't planning all this, but luckily things even didn't went too bad. It was the connections between the several games were made naturally.
That's how the Wretchedverse. Yeah, people start talking about the Wretchedverse.
It was born out of people talking about this. So and people asking, so are you going to do? And yeah, normally we would say yeah, we will, and we published several things based on those discussions with other players, and that's how some of the games appeared, or at least they appeared at that time because people talked about it. Not all. Country was already kind of planned. That was, I think, the second game.
Yes, Epoch was also more or less planned.
Yes, Epoch wasn't actually planned as it is, but it was something that was supposed to be published for post.
Do you want to talk now a little bit game by game, like the origins? Let's start with Bastards Country. And
okay.
Okay, we already talked a bit about Bastards, but what I wanted to highlight is that Bastards is on top of what we already did, what we already said, a cinematic cinematic game based on low budget Italian fantasy films, but also it's supposed to be dark fantasy and low fantasy. So, well, gritty, of course, like those films should be, but also a bit humorous.
Yeah, it's light.
It has a bit of, it can be dark and light at the same time.
Light in terms of
A bit, well, I
you
would
can
say a
include
bit
silly.
childish. Yes, it can be a bit of silly stuff. Like, for example, now on this new, we're going to have the armored, combat armored goats. Because that was something that one of our players came out and we were playing now. So now that's going to happen. So we're going to have goats going into combat.
So Wretched Country, there's not that much to say about it. It's basically
Spaghetti.
what you can expect from it. It's a Western spaghetti. Of course, it's also, since all our games have a bit of occult mixed in horror, it's also a Weird West.
Yeah, we try not to make it very weird and have more.
Well, Weird West in not in steampunk.
Yes, I know, exactly, but-
not that kind of
But
Weird
we
West.
couldn't make it just a historical game. Just
Yes,
the horror part keep entering
so that's
there.
it. It's not steampunk. It's just Western, but with elements of horror, and not truly historical accurate because it's a spaghetti Western, and it's not supposed to be that accurate. It's supposed to be style over substance. After that one comes the one which is a little bit more serious in the way we wrote it and created the concept. Not entirely serious, but a little bit more serious. Wretched Epoch, which takes place in the Belle Epoque, which is the ending of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. Paris is the place that you should run a campaign in, but it's not mandatory. You can place it somewhere else. Of course, you can cross over with Wretched Country because the time is almost the same.
But then I get the weirdness and the wretchedness on that comes when we look at that was a very interesting period in time. But at the same time, there was a lot of things happening regarding occult and weird science.
Mm-hmm.
So when you go into that, then you get the movies coming in again.
So in this case, usually if you are playing an occult game in the 19th or horror game in the 19th century, you are going to play aristocrats and librarians and all that. Obviously, you can play that here, but you can also play scum, basically.
Exactly. Well, a gang member, right? An Apache.
So
that's a French gang member. If you.
Yeah. So that's basically something like Gangs of New York, but in Paris. The equivalent of that. There's a whole underworld of gangs in Paris at the time. Of course, part of this was created by the media of the time, by the press.
They were glamorized by the press.
Yeah, they kind of glamorized it. There were even stories written about it, and then movies made about stories of the Apaches. They were called Apaches because at the time people talked about the Native Americans of the same name, so they were nicknamed.
They were savages.
Yeah, they were savages. They had tattoos and they had a kind of costume.
They were punks, basically.
Yeah, they were punks of the time. They were criminals. They were thieves. They were pimps. The women were prostitutes. Some of them were also thieves, and that's the kind of thing about. This is not the only way to be wretched.
Like you can play.
Of course, this is one of the options.
But you can also play a policeman, and you can also do wretched playing a policeman.
So we mentioned several times the TV show, a French TV show called Paris 1900, which shows how wretched a cop of the time can be. It's recommended if you are playing Wretched Epoch. And you can also play other kind of wretched characters, even if they are upper class, like Sherlock Holmes could be a very wretched character if you play it less like a gentleman and more like the drug addict that he was. So
Even if you're playing an aristocrat, even more, or
yeah,
criminal
yeah, well,
mastermind,
yeah, that's true. The criminal
a gentleman
masterminds,
thief,
the criminal, yeah, well, so
Arsène
there's Arsène
Lupin,
Lupin, there's
Fantomas.
yes, and another one, the first one, which right now I can't remember
Yeah,
the
that's
name.
the one I can ever
Yeah,
remember.
that is very famous. Um, those characters of the time, the European pulp, not really pulp, but pre pulp, uh, are all wretched. They aren't heroes. They are, well, they are precisely or anti-heroes or villains. Some of them. It's difficult to determine, to draw the line if they are villains or not. So that's it.
Then you got Redsploitation.
Yes, then comes Wretchedverse. Wretchedverse is obviously the most wretched of them all
Yeah,
because it's
cinematic, I would
and
say.
the most cinematic. Yes, that one deserves to be remade because at the time it was basically a set of rules. There's no setting, and obviously there can be really no setting because it's made to play exploitation movies, and that would be several settings. But this one at the time it was a bunch of rules that didn't exist yet that, to play in modern days or in contemporary games. So there's not much information about places where to run and game mastering hints.
So that's probably what's going to be more
Yeah,
several types of exploitation.
that will be developed.
How
Obviously,
you should
there are
play.
some of our scenarios, or most of our
Exactly.
scenarios are exploitation.
There's a lot of them for Giallos.
Yes, and there's one for black exploitation.
Non-exploitation.
One of them, it's you can
Yes,
play it as a
it's
giallo
Giallo
or
or
an
non-exploitation.
exploitation. There's
Well, Sexual Holocaust.
yeah, sexual holocaust is a more modern take on that. It's a like Hellraiser, and there are some other things that not even though they aren't actually exploitation, but you can play them a little bit more like that. So exploitation is basically the most cinematic of all. Then comes space, I think, right?
Space
Or
or New
no,
Flash?
New
No, New
Flash. Yeah,
Flash.
New Flash came first. So New Flash was something that was already published before by Postmortem Studios, and at the time it was called Postcards from a Valida. It was already a very wretched game. It was published for Punk, which is obviously, as a name implies, a punk game. This version is basically the same thing as Setting goes, but the rules are OSR, obviously, as all the other games. New Flash, it's difficult to explain.
Yeah.
It's the most difficult to explain of them all. So let's say that let's talk about the influences. It's probably the
It's
best way.
retro punk. It's not retro cyberpunk. Retrofuturism. It's
future noir.
Yeah.
It's a bit of cyberpunk, a bit of biopunk, body horror. So mixes lots of different genres. So it's in the near future, even though it's not determined. It takes place in Validad, which is the name that we gave to a city in northern Morocco. So it's Tangier, the place that where William Burroughs lived for a while, and that's the reason that we picked it up, because it's basically the world of Naked Lunch, the book and the movie. So our main influences were William Burroughs and Cronenberg. Not just Naked Lunch, but
just
all
everything.
Cronenberg.
That's I have the body hour.
Yeah, there's a lot of influences from there. And also there are some bits of William Gibson, because obviously it's a near future game, and there's some there's an ambience of cyberpunk, even though not much cyber in there, because they are mostly investing in biotechnology, because that connects with body horror and Cronenberg.
Well, people compare it with, said it's a bit similar with Over the Edge, because Over the Edge is also inspired in Burroughs.
Yeah, it's very inspired in Burroughs and I think probably Cronenberg as well. I don't know. Ours is, but it's possible that Over the Edge is also inspired by at least Naked Lunch. Um, and Clive Barker is also an influence because that's where we introduced the Apostles of Pain, which are demons.
There's a supernatural side. There's a
Yeah,
very
there's
strong
also a
supernatural
supernatural
side on to New Flesh.
So there are creatures from the beyond, which is the common link between all the games. That's where the supernatural that's a supernatural origin, is a realm, a dark realm, which connects to ours, not all the time, but occasionally.
In occasional places.
Yes, like Avalida is one of them. So there's that place there where was where several corporations in the late 60s started investing, creating laboratories and clinics and research and development.
In doing very strange research.
Yes, doing very strange research in biotechnology and other stuff, but mostly biotechnology, and that's the reason, probably, or maybe there were already connections to the beyond, but let's say that probably the experiences and all those strange things opened those gates, and now in the future things are even weirder than before. So that's New Flesh, a strange game.
The strangest of them all.
Probably the strangest. So
Space.
Next, Space. Space is a space opera, but as always, it's a space opera that's wretched. So it's also inspired by, in this case, Star Wars knockoffs.
Yes.
And I would probably say, even though that's not an Italian production, but Battle Beyond the Stars.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Probably and Star Crash, right? And Star Crash with David Hasselhoff. Those are probably the biggest, or the biggest hits, but there are other movies. You probably,
there are tons of movies.
Yeah, tons of movies that can be thought about as inspirational for Wretched Space. Wretched Space as a setting, it's still in development, but there will be more scenarios, more setting for it. But that it's basically established now. There are two big factions there. One of them is the Galactic Federation.
Of course, it's always the Galactic Federation.
But there's a difference in this case. It's not the all-powerful Galactic Federation or the oppressive Empire. The Galactic Federation is basically a corrupt and weak government that it still goes by, but it's
probably because of all the bureaucracy.
Yeah,
people don't want to fight against the red tape.
Even though there are some outer rim worlds that are trying to be independent because they think that they can do better without the Galactic Federation. And then there's another faction, a big faction, which is the Adityaans. The Adityaans were already introduced in other games. They are the
ancient aliens.
The ancient aliens in Wretched Bastards. They created humankind in that game. And well, if you are going to use the Wretchedverse, that's basically a premise. Even though that's not really important. In this case, it's more important because they aren't in Wretched Space. They aren't the ancient aliens. They are the enemy.
Yeah.
Because they are
the weird aliens. They don't want to be part of the.
They are psychics, so they aren't part of the Galactic Federation, and they have their own region of space where they are the most powerful force, and they have several other alien races allied, and some of them are not quite allied. They're
not exactly at war with the Federation, but
no, it's a Cold War.
Exactly, it's a Cold War.
There are other factions, smaller ones, that introduce some variety here, but you can expect that there are some guys that look like Europeans.
And you have Japanese in space.
And well, the usual things. Then there are some aliens that are also archetypal, like dogs, dog lookalikes, and the big alien big green
And
alien.
the lizard alien.
Yeah, the lizard alien. Well, all those kinds of archetypes.
No cats.
No cats, yeah, but that might be something that we could introduce, a cat species. Then there's Wretched Apocalypse, which is, as the name implies, it's a post-apocalyptic game. It's not quite a setting, it's a set of rules. Like, it's probably closer to Wretchploitation because it's a smaller book. There's no setting in there. It has mostly rules for some stuff that are not in other places, like creating your own settlement and tables for that kind of thing. So that's it. Apocalypse. There's not much to say about it. And now there's
Also, there's a lot of good bad movies from the
oh yeah,
about the end
yeah.
of the world,
And-
not
and
just
all-
Mad Max.
and most of them, probably most of them are Italian or European productions.
Knockoffs of Mad Max.
Yeah, knockoffs. Because in that case, they aren't knockoffs of an American movie, so it's even worse. Because Mad Max is already a smaller budget movie, so the knockoffs are very, very small budget. So you can think about dozens of them. Of course, it could be also a zombie apocalypse, not necessarily.
Yeah.
It's you can mix and match all those things. And now there are the rules.
Yeah, we forgot Darkness.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah, should have been. For a moment, it was planned as the new rule set that was also a setting for horror. But then came the OSR thing and the OGL thing, and then we had to do the rules. So okay, Darkness. Darkness it's a large book. It's behind. I'm not going to show it now, but we can put some images for that. Darkness is a new. Where we introduced the revised rules. The first. Now we are already one step ahead of that. They were even more revised, but it was already.
It's an horror game, but it's a bit generic because the idea that you have to play any type of horror.
Yes, it includes
at any time.
Yeah, so you can play it in future, in the past, and it has information for all that. So it's basically, in terms of rules, it has most of the rules that were already published, including the things like combat for modern weaponry and old armor and all that kind of things. And you have psionics as well, and magic. Not magic as in a fantasy game; it's ritualistic magic. But that's basically the thing in Wretched games. We took out the spells from the game. It's always rituals, so no fireballs. And there's also technology and psionics and biotechnology and cyber technology mentioned there. And then there are recommendations for styles of play.
And the beginning of our setting, which is basically
which is a lot of
making everything putting the Wretchedverse together, but united by the Beyond. So you have factions placed in the Beyond.
Some of the factions were taken from other games that were published before,
but adapted to the reality. To something,
to the reality, not just contemporary, but also something a little bit more realistic. So there are some factions from Wretched Bastards and some others that were introduced in space, I think.
There are also new races.
And there are also new races. Yes, you can play vampires and werewolves, not with these names. They are called vampires.
Incubus
and Loup-Garou, yes, and Incubus, which is an intermediate state before you turn into a puzzle of pain. Puzzles of pain are people, or were people. Now, when they turn into puzzles of pain, they are demons. But there's an intermediate state when they are still not demons, but not people anymore. So they are Incubus and Succubus.
And then there's the Children of the Night.
Yeah, the children of the night are weird creatures, just like the creatures in Cabal or
Yeah, it's gonna say that the inspirations for darkness are Clive Barker is the
yeah.
biggest
So yeah,
inspiration.
it's basically the Clive Barker unofficial game. It's
That is not cult.
yeah, not so Cult first edition is also a big inspiration for this, but we did it without taking any look at the mythology. There's no mythology.
Exactly. There's a part. Well, it's not that I don't like the cult mythology, but I prefer to have the game with no religious background there.
So if you want to add something like that, you can
You
add
can
because
add exactly.
the space is open for all that. We just said that it's, the beyond has nothing to do with religion. It's not the hell. It's not any kind of hell, whatever the religion you can think about. Obviously, uh, being inspired by these things like Clive Barker, for example, it looks a little bit more like a Catholic hell, but it's
Exactly.
not really. So there are references to Dante's Inferno, but it's just well, it's the kind of thing like in Cult. So that's a place that has existed for long or since ever, but it influenced religions, but it's not not actually explained by the
Exactly. Like
religions.
I forgot that other race that we have the Deva that are angels,
Yeah,
but they're not
yeah,
really
they are
angels because
angels,
angels
but
don't
yeah,
exist.
yeah. So that's it. So a lot of that book is rules, obviously, because there's a compilation of rules, but there's also a large description of the beyond, which, as I said before, it's a dark realm. It's a dimension, and even though it's very difficult to explain and always changing, but there are places that are always there. Some common.
And I'm gonna say another thing, yeah, but that we like to live things, especially the beyond. The beyond is vague because
Yeah.
if anybody that's playing Wretched, they can so they have enough space to create whatever they want on the beyond, just by and it doesn't go against.
Yeah, it's difficult to have that kind of problem
When
like
you leave things
this.
open enough, then yeah, people can just fit everything they want there, and we can also well
And
this
other people have
grow
been
organically.
writing things besides us, and we don't really need to.
Yeah, you don't have. There's not really if it's not canon, that's okay
Yeah,
because the
that's no
canon is
problem.
open
There's
enough.
no canon, so
There's a bit of canon, but you can mold it
yeah.
using
Well,
the.
there is something, but it's not
But even so,
definitive.
something that we have in the Wretchedverse and the Beyond is that so the Bastards of Fantasy's setting takes place in Antilia. That is a planet that is very similar to Earth, but yeah, that's what I'm going to say. We never say if it's Earth a long, long time ago, like in Conan, or it's a planet that it just looks like
Well,
just like Earth,
it
or it's
could
Earth in
be
another
yeah.
dimension,
That's it.
in a Nietzschean way,
I
right?
like that
Or
when
the
it's
return, the eternal return.
it could be this is where things developed in a different way. So
Exactly.
in this reality, it's like this, and that's what.
But because the beyond exists, you can actually travel to
Yeah,
beyond between
different
parallel
dimensions.
realities.
So that's possible. It's possible to travel to Antilia and the opposite from Antilia to other places. So everything is connected in this game. You can play and people have been doing that, so it's
Yeah, not
possible.
just us. We did it,
Yeah,
but other people have been
so
doing it. So
you
they
come from one place and you go into another. The beyond can be the connection between them all, and that's explained in Darkness. There are places there that you can access different locales from different games. So that's there are other games planned. Obviously, the superheroes is the one that was been mentioned several times. It's probably going to be developed soon. Now that we have the rules already published and already it's being sold.
yeah, we were in a corner. So first the rules were not completed because they grew as we were doing different genres. But then there are some people saying, "Oh, I don't have some generic rules. Why all the books have all the rules? I just wanted the." But we were saying, yeah, but if someone buys this and they never they didn't bought the other games, they're gonna need all the entire rules. So
Yeah.
now we can restart
Yeah,
and
so
with the generic rules.
if you have bought some of the other ones, or if you still want to buy, they are still available. So you can, if you don't want to play the whole Wretchedverse, you can just buy one book and then
Exactly.
the second edition will be in a different spirit. We'll have it will be more for people who are, well, either people who are wishing to connect things and want more information about each setting, or for people who want to play want to buy a setting for other game, because this is OSR, so you can
Exactly.
just plug in and play it with some other set of rules. You can play it with something that has a different spirit. It doesn't have to be a game to play anti-heroes. You just pick up a setting. That's what we're thinking about. So the next thing will be Wretched Bastards, but you don't really have to take it as bastards. There will be a setting there, and there are bastards that exist in that world. Not necessarily our characters. If you want to play it as a regular hero style game, and then there will be the other games in the second edition that also in the same.
I think, for example, some people that like Cthulhu probably will be interested in picking Epoch and just to add, mix it to Call of Cthulhu rules.
Yeah,
although it's not exactly OSR, but it's also an easy
there's at least one OSR game that's Lovecraftian, probably two. Of course, it helps if you are playing any of these settings with an OSR set of rules, because it will have compatibility. But even if not, Epoch, even the first edition, has a lot of information.
It also works as a setting that you can just plug to any type of game.
The difference that there will be in the second edition is that we are adding more setting to that, because the first editions were except for exploitation and apocalypse, they were crammed full of setting, and you could already use it as a source book for some other game. But the next editions will be even more like that.
We don't have to take too much time, more space with rules. There'll probably still be some rules, or at least tables.
Yes, of course there will be tables
to customize for specific and probably classes. Not classes. They have another name now.
No, they are called occupations and archetypes.
So I was going to say archetypes,
maybe not,
but I knew
probably not occupations, because the occupation is the equivalent to class.
But probably some archetypes, specific
for some of the settings will have. Even though some of those are some of the specific ones are already in the generic rules, but I left a few out that will be introduced in each one of the setting books, and other stuff like equipment and specific rules, specific tables of events. We have rules for carousing, and that's also, even though the core book already has some,
but not specific
tables,
for it.
Not really very specific, so there will be also that. We are looking at Wretched Role-Playing Game, which is the basic game, as a kind of a restart without the OGL. Even though it's still compatible, but some things have changed, like names, and some rules have changed. They are more streamlined, more simple. And it's the next step for to evolve this. Obviously, all the scenarios published until now, they are still compatible. I'm doing some changes even to those because there's not a lot to change, just a few names. So I've been re-releasing, not re-releasing, just replacing the names and putting them available again. So they can be similar to the current rules.
Yeah, but even with the names,
you can just
it's compatible.
It's easier probably for the purchaser than an errata, but you could do it anyway. I think that's
it.
That's it. Yeah. Obviously, this wasn't trained. We didn't have a script, so it went like Wretched itself. We just talked about stuff.
We don't do scripts.
No, and we don't do planning as well.
Yeah, it doesn't sound natural.
So that's why. Was this the best way to explain Wretchedverse? Probably not. but it was the most organic way to explain Wretchedverse, and the way that
You need to do a video, just a video, not us talking, a video to explain Wretchedverse. Animation with the images and all that.
Yeah, probably that's a very short promo with all that stuff. Well, anyway, if you want to know something about it, you have to watch this whole video, because just watching bits probably won't help. But if you are looking for information, I think this covers.
It's only 40 minutes. You don't have to watch the entire video.
Okay. That's it for now.
Bye
Bye. Stay wretched.